to it. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Any opposed? All right, the agenda has been adopted. We do not have anyone signed up for public comment this morning, so that takes us right to the consideration of the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve that?
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor, raise your hands and say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the consent agenda is adopted. That turns us to principal-led data reports. Dr. Porter.
Good morning. We are thrilled to continue our principal-led data days presentations. This is something we ask principals to come and give to the board. Some principals 4 times a year. This morning we have Debbie Ridge Elementary Principal Tina Woods, and after her, Gentry Middle School Principal Sam Bornhauser. So I will welcome Principal Tina Woods to the podium. Tina knows she has 10 minutes to present, and then we'll do 5 minutes for questions.
All right, good morning. Good morning, everyone. We'll just go ahead and dig in since I have 10 minutes. All right, so before I talk a little bit about this data, it's important to note the district's goal is that we increase student achievement in academics and curriculum, in mathematics and communication arts. And also, according to the audit, it is important to kind of desegregate our data by demographics. So we'll just go ahead and get started with that. So when we look at 2023 and 2024 school year, reading, we have moved up 22%. We started from 22% to 36%. And then math, we went from 19% to 21%. This is kindergarten, first and second grade. And so when we look at the increase from our kindergarten, starting at 2022-23, we see 19%, and then 23-24 is 52%. So that's quite a significant increase in our data. And then in our mathematics, one of the important things to note is our kinders also from 12% to 28% jump. So that is a pretty good jump. All right, and so then we were looking at grades 3, 4, and 5. We see in reading, 14% was the year before, 22-23, and then 16% in reading. And then in our math, we have less than 5% to 6%. And so looking at our third grade, they went up a percentage. Looking at our fifth grade, it's pretty much consistent. And then looking at our reading and by race, we're looking at our white students, which 28%, they went from 25 to 28%. Our black students went from 12% to 9% proficient. And then when we look at our math, that's an area where we're really working on to improve in our math. So, all right, so when we look at our proficiency growth for fall of 2023, we had 10%. And then when we look at our winter growth, it's 16%. So that is an improvement. And then our growth check was 19%. And so when we look at our lexile and quartile scores, reading is 11% proficiency, and then 21% for winter proficiency. And so on our math, we did have some growth from fall to winter as well, and likewise in math. All right, so when we look at our attendance from last year, we were 79.6% attendance. And then this year we are 79.8% attendance. When we look at who is coming the most, it looks like our fifth grade students are coming the most with 88% attendance. All right, so when we look at our behavior incidents, just looking at last year, 22, 23, a total amount of incidents at this time last year was 404. That's including our ISS, our OSS, and our non-suspension. This year we are 244, so significantly less than this time last year. All right, so when we look at our kick-up data, one of the things that we have been talking about with our teachers is what we really need to focus on in the classroom. And so what are they doing the most? When we look at our rigor analysis, we see the students are able to apply the information that they are given. They are understanding it and remember it. But when we look at our high yield strategies, one of the things that we notice that our teachers are doing is a lot of teacher directed, direct instruction, questions, answers, organizers, and things of that nature. So we want to really work on higher level thinking. And so those are some things that we're going to be working on. Okay, so when we talk about our strengths and our challenges, so some of our challenges are retaining our new hires. So it is no secret that Derby is known for high turnover with administration, with our teachers, and all of those things. And so our goal is to be consistent with the hires that we have. We have really good teachers right now in place, and so we want to do everything that we can to keep those teachers. Increasing academic grades across all grade levels. We want to continue to rebuild trust with all stakeholders, and that is continuous. Maintaining the marigolds, which is relative to our culture. And so we did a little demonstration with walnuts and marigolds. And so a marigold basically can bloom and grow anywhere if you drop those seeds, but a walnut will kill anything. And so we want to talk about how many marigolds that we have in our building, and then how can we keep those marigolds, and then if we see a walnut, how can we change them into marigolds? So those are some of the things that we continuously have going on at Derby in conversations. And so our strengths, we have an instructional mentor, instructional coaches. We have 2 of those to support our new hires. We do weekly data team meetings across all grade levels with inclusion of our data wall and our data binders. The data wall is new this year, but it is a powerful, powerful tool when looking at where our students are and how we move them to where they need to be. Our strengths is a significant increase in school attendance. So this is my second year at Derby. Before I came, we were at 68% attendance, and so we're close to 80 at this point. Highlighting the individualized strengths and skills of our staff. So those are things that we continuously work on because morale is a thing. And so we really want to focus on acknowledging and recognizing their strengths. Continuous positive feedback from all stakeholders. And so we do enlist feedback from our family members, from our community, teachers, all of that, even our students. We ask them how are they feeling about things and all of, about Derby. So we change things as we need to. Okay. So our targeted actions for improvement, we want to increase family and community involvement in the PTA. To be honest with you, I am so happy to say that we have some family members that want to actually be employed at Derby. So our attendance secretary is one of our PTA members. We have 2 CAs that are parents, and we have an instructional aide that is a parent at Derby. Continued training around classroom management for our teachers, so that is ongoing. We enlist our behavior support specialists to come in and do PDs for our teachers. Scaffolding support in all grades with increased small group reading fidelity to ensure the function of RTI. So we are really working on what small group looks like, the importance of that, and the effects of RTI. Acquiring a math interventionist, that is something that we definitely need, so we're working on that. And then we're continuously using iReady data to drive next steps in decision making with each grade level. All right, so my favorite part is our celebrations. So the first picture is one of our kinder rooms, and then that is the teacher doing small group. She is really effective at that. And so we wanted to highlight that. The second slide is we just had an event, a titled event with our kinders. And so the turnout was so significant that we had a lot of family members in all grade levels saying, what are we missing? They wanted to be a part of it, but it was actually our title event, so they're coming out. When you look at this is one of our data team meetings for our 4th grade group, and they're looking at that bullseye. So what that is a visual for students in the classroom to see how they're meeting their goals towards proficiency on iReady. So they put their dot up there anonymously, and then they get to move it. So that was a fun thing to do. And then lastly, not lastly, but lastly on this, our mini-max. That is the amount of mini-max scholars that we have that wanted to be a part of it and wanted to be role models at Derby. So that is pretty much it. Questions?
Does anyone have any questions? Go ahead, April.
Thanks. Great presentation.
Thank you.
You have a lot of areas that you guys have some strengths, but I had some questions about some other data. I noticed that the attendance for students with IEPs was down 10%, and the out-of-school suspensions was more than double for that same group.
Yes.
Do you have, what's contributing to that, and are there one or two specific issues that seem to be the top ones?
Yes. So if we look at our data, when we talk about out-of-school suspensions, just in that area, the majority of our out-of-school suspensions thus far has come from our kinders. And so the reason for that is last year we had 4 sections of kindergarten. This year we had 3 starting. And that being said, the needs were more significant. And so it was a lot of challenges with behavior and all of those things. And so we asked if we could have a 4th section to kind of reduce that and take some of the pressure off. So that was contributing. And then as far as our IEP students, a lot of that had to do with the level of aggression that some of those kids were displaying. And it was about safety for all the students around. And so those were our options, but we were working with our special education team to kind of figure out other options for those students as well.
Well, and I think we should employ out-of-school suspensions when it's appropriate. So I don't want to convey that you need to keep safety issues or you not follow the behavior guidelines that have laid out. I think that's important to do. The other question I had, and maybe you can help me understand the data, I noticed in K through 2, the proficiency rate of our Black students in reading was 30%, but in grades 3 through 5, it was 9%. What do you have any idea of what contributes to that?
Yes, so with our K2, again, once we were able to get that 4th section, we were able to really be instrumental as far as our instructional team working with that grade level. When we talk about our upper levels, like 3rd, 4th, 5th, we're talking about years of foundational deficiencies. So with the lack of consistency with admin and teachers. And so those kids come with a lot of gaps because of the history of Derby. And so, but kindergarten, we're kind of excited. We have the ability to influence them moving forward. Yes.
Are there any resources or supports that you think you need that would help with some of your struggling areas?
Yes, so I know we have 2 coaches and an instructional mentor, so we definitely want to retain them. They are instrumental in working with all of our grade levels. We want to add a math interventionist because we want to also target math. That's an area of concern as well for us. I know we have 1 homeschool communicator. Another one would allow us to kind of work more with our families and target that while we have, support with the building needs. Just things like that, and another instructional aid. There are just small little tweaks that we need that would kind of tighten Derby up a little bit. So you're welcome.
Dr. Woods, this is your second year. You're in your second year as being principal at Derby, correct?
I am.
Okay. And I think I asked that just as you were talking about there being admin shifts throughout the years, and just kind of for those that might not know that you are this is your second year as that principal.
Yes.
And providing that stability there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for, whoa, thank you. Thank you for presenting. April kind of asked my question. I was going to ask you, what do you need? Like what things would you say you would need? And then and you kind of answered that. So do you feel like the actions you're taking now to address your data are going to start to show improvements? Like, do you feel like those things are working, they just need time?
Yes, because it's also important to note that when you look at our data, it's only a reflection of how many students are proficient, but it does not reflect the amount of growth that we've seen so far. So like while we have students like in 5th grade that may be on the 3rd grade or 2nd grade level, it does not reflect the fact that they have moved up to grade levels. Or it doesn't, it doesn't show that data, but we are celebrating so much because we respect the process of what it takes to get our kids on grade level.
Thank you. All right. Great job. Thank you for
Thank
coming.
you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Sam Bornhauser, principal of Gentry Middle School.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for having me come in and talk about Gentry. So excited. This is my first year at Gentry as the head principal. I'm excited to be in the role and to support our kids and our school. So, whoa, sorry about that. So first of all, this is our building data regarding goal 3.1 of the CSEP, which is scholars that are proficient or advanced in the MAP growing by 3% in communication arts and mathematics, and the audit finding 4.3, disaggregated data indicating students representing specific groups that are underperforming, okay? So there's a few things we're excited about in this data, all right? One of the things is when we look at growth, we can see that in reading, we've had a 4% growth, which is an outstanding level of growth. We were at last year at a 49%, and this year at a 53% in proficiency. We can also see a 3% upward growth in our advanced students, which is absolutely outstanding. When we look at our math, we do see a downward trend when it comes to our performance on proficiency. We've really dug into this data to see why, to really look at how do we address this and what do we need to do to move this forward, right? We've seen an uptick in advanced, but again, the downtick in proficiency, and so we're looking at that and addressing that as a building, and I'll get into that. So I'm looking at my notes to make sure I got everything. So also, if you'll look here in our subgroup performance, we've had a trend where our students that are EL, have special services, or on free and reduced lunch underperform their peers. In particular, the groups that have underperformed the most have been our special services students and our students on free and reduced lunch, okay? We do notice a pretty big upward trend where we didn't even have a noticeable data of students on IEPs that were proficient that are currently 10%. And also with math, upward trend where not any noticeable proficiency now is at 6%. You can also see a growth in reading with free and reduced lunch students, 23%, so a 9% growth there, and a 4% growth in mathematics. So those groups that we're really targeting and trying to support more fully are performing significantly better. We also see the downward trend on EL. One of the things we're looking at here as we talk about our EL programs and services in our school is when are the students coming to us and how are they performing as they leave or over time, okay? So that's kind of an interesting data point. When you look at overall performance here and you look at our subgroups, we can see that our Black students have improved by 1% in proficiency in reading. Our multi-race students have moved up by 6%. Okay, we also see an upward trend in their advanced. They're 3% higher in advanced. Mathematics matches the data over here. We have a little bit of a downward trend in a few areas. Our Black students have increased by 1% in their mathematical performance. We can also see there's now statistical significant improvement in that 5% of them are now advanced. You can also see the same trend a little bit downward in all those areas for mathematics, okay? Yeah, it's working. So this is really exciting when we look at it. So one of the things we noticed with our iReady data was when our students came in the fall of this year, we were pretty comparable to last year in reading. When we came in on math, we were actually below last year. So that's what we're seeing right now and why we're having to target math. We're about slightly lower than last year. So we're saying, okay, so they came in a little bit lower. We've got to really focus on math to be able to achieve equivalent to or improve upon what happened last year. Okay, and so that's really a focus for us. But what's really exciting is when we see this, we see a 10% upward trend in our reading. Our teachers are amazing. Our kids are outstanding. We've really focused on and improved in that area. And the same thing in math. We have a 9% upward trend in mathematics, which is outstanding. Okay, we also see with that the same trend in our advanced students. We have a significant growth in the percentage of advanced students in those areas. And also they are outpacing their Lexile and Quantile, which is their ability to access the information and respond to the questions and data. So our attendance addresses goal 1 of the CSIP. 90% of scholars will attend school at least 90% of the time. Our goal is to go up by 5% each year. This year we have an upward trend of about 2%, which is outstanding. We're getting better. We're working at this. We're addressing it every single day. We can see that our Black students have increased by almost 5% in their attendance rate, which is absolutely amazing. Like I said, our target is on EL, our special services, and free and reduced lunch. We did see that our EL population has increased a little bit on their attendance. Our IEP group is slightly down. So then we've been talking about with our IEP team, with our special services department, and all of us in administration, the whole school, how do we address this? What do we do? And then our free and reduced lunch population, which was really a target for this year because it was one of the lowest areas, you can see, as far as attendance, has over a 3% increase in attendance this year. You can also see over here on this side, if you look at trends, you can see that the students that attended last year in 6th grade have increased by 0.5% on their attendance rate. And again, our kids last year in 7th grade have increased by over 1% on their attendance rate. So once we get them and we're working with them, we're seeing that improvement. So this is our OSS and ISS data on our students meeting CSIP goal 2.1, which is the number of out-of-school suspensions decreasing by 50%. So you can see our ISS rate is slightly down, but pretty equivalent. But our OSS rate is down about 22%, which is amazing. It is a testament to the work our teachers and staff are doing to really address and make sure things don't get to that level of being an OSS, a major incident, right? So when we look at the data over here, we can see a significant downward trend on Black students with OSS rates. Same thing with our IEP students and our free and reduced lunch. And what we noticed on our data trends was that our highest rates of OSS were in free and reduced lunch. And so that is coming down significantly, okay? And just so you know, data-wise, this Black group of students down 38% in OSS rates, which is amazing. So this is our classroom analysis from our kick-up data through walkthroughs. Check in time, sorry. So really quickly, our teachers are doing a great job of keeping the learning targets on the board. We're working on how we have higher levels of rigor within our classroom, okay? We have worked on, when we walk in and do our kick-ups, identifying the particular rigor that is occurring rather than multiple rigor analysis to determine where we're at, and so we can improve the rigor within the classroom, and that is occurring. We're seeing very authentic engagement from our kids. And so you can see that what we're excited about here with our data is we're seeing a good mix of student and teacher directed or strategies, okay? And over time, when we came out of COVID, a lot of times it was on the teacher-directed end. Okay, strengths. Reduced incidence of ISS, OSS, we just talked about that. We have improved our attendance rates by 2%. Our black students have improved proficient and advanced in ELA and math on the diagnostic. And I think this is a real strength that people don't know about Gentry right now, is that our student population has become significantly more diverse. And that's a real strength, and we're excited about. And it's allowed us to look at how we serve our student population. Our greatest challenges are that black for introduced lunch, EL, and special services students perform below school-wide peers in math and ELA on iReady. And for some reason I put growth, that's the diagnostic. And then multiracial, IEP, Hispanic, and free introduced students have lower attendance rates than their school-wide peers. And so these are things we're always addressing and discussing and working on. So targeted actions, our homeschool communicator and our counselor, outreach counselor, work with families to improve attendance. We have a system of supports for attendance where we start off with our administration and counselors reaching out to families, and then over time we have greater supports based on attendance. We have data chats with students to understand their performance so they know what to work on to grow and improve. And we have established building-wide classroom and school expectations, which has really helped cut down on the OSS rates because students understand expectations and what they do. So, celebrations. All of our grades finish their enrollment. So enrollment's a big thing, especially at the biggest middle school. So that's something to celebrate. We went on a tour of Rockbridge High School with our 8th graders on January 18th, and we had an enrollment night for them too, where the administrators and counselors came in and continued to support them. And at the time of this, we had a 98% completion rate with registration. We're closer to 100% now. We had our geography bee on January 23rd, which was a lot of fun. I know you guys have probably all seen that and were a part of that in some way. We had a 6th grader advance from our school, which was really cool to see a 6th grader make it out and to the district finals. And then our spelling bee was on January 25th. We had 25 kids in the finals, and a 7th grader was able to represent our school there. So, all right.
Mr.
I have a question on the kick-up data, and this may be something that you know or don't know. So it's more for me just to understand what it is. So when you're getting those things, you're going into the classrooms and seeing, all right, there were X number of instances of teacher-directed reinforcing effort, et cetera. And you're checking a box and saying that's what you're seeing, and that's where we're getting like there were 1,755 incidents of that. Where are those, and this may be the thing that you don't know, where are those particular practices coming from? Like who set that list of instructional practices, like what are high yield, what are low yield, et cetera?
Okay, so on our kick-up data, we as a district have conversations and norm what we're doing. So we have all the principals, we all go through and do walkthroughs. So like we've had 2 walkthrough sessions with Dr. Taylor, and we've gone through and made sure that Rockbridge, Gentry, John Warner, all the elementary schools, that we're all on the same page in how we're evaluating and how we're looking at that.
Well, I guess, who decided that? Yeah, who decided that lecture was a low yield instructional practice?
So we look at the body of research that's out there that tells us what are the best practices to be able to increase academic outcomes. And at the top, it talks about student directed, it talks about things that are expected in the classroom based upon research that says this will yield better outcomes for scholars.
Is it inclusive of John Hattie's work with
There's some
efficacy?
of John Hattie's work. A lot of it is from Marzano. It's like a compilation of various researchers, and so what we come out with is when we see these things, or when we've seen these things in place, this is where we've seen classrooms that are thriving and being successful. And remember that this is trend data. This is not a one-time, one and done. So I will walk into a classroom where the expectation is that I'll walk into classrooms and check to see what's going on, and I look at how is my data trending. So that way it's not like a knee or a one and done sort of thing.
Do you have questions for Gentry specifically? Okay.
I appreciate you kind of expanding on that approach on attendance. I really think it's kind of important when we're looking at middle school, because I think that's the moment where like kids kind of decide, like, is school, is this going to be deeply important to me, or like, am I really graining into this? And I think attendance kind of plays a role in this. I was curious, you said that there at times after like those counselor reach outs to parents and like those data chats with students, if that's not really working, there's additional supports that you all provide. Would you mind kind of expanding on those additional supports?
Yeah, so we've really been working on that and developing that this year. So we start off, and it's counselors, and it's administrators, and it's teachers, and we're reaching out to families, and we're encouraging them to attend, and we're working on that attendance piece. And we already have pretty good attendance. I mean, we're over 80%. But we're trying to encourage them to understand the impact it has. So what we see data-wise, and Ms. London brought this up with us the other day, is when students attend over 90% of the time, they're 5 times more likely to out-achieve, or to be proficient or advanced, you know? And so we're very aware of that. We want our parents to be aware of that, our families to be aware of that. And then what happens is if a student's still struggling, then our outreach counselor and our homeschool communicator, which our homeschool communicator is outstanding, Miss Goins, if you don't know her, they'll go to houses, they'll talk to families, they just continue to support them and see what's going on to try and encourage that attendance piece. Yeah.
April.
I have 2 questions. One is, in reading and math, AI is American Indian, right? I'm suspecting that the decrease in proficiency more has to do with the number of students identifying as that in your school.
Correct.
Okay.
And not having a statistically significant number of students.
Yeah, and so I wanted to kind of point that out for all of us and the public. And then I'm not sure if you touched on this or not. Have you been able to identify yet the 1 or 2 top reasons why the attendance rate of your IEP students is down about 4.5%? Or are you still working on that?
Oh, good question. So, yes, we are working on that. What we're finding is that we have a couple of specialized programs within our school. And so the students in the specialized programs have specialized needs, and we support them in a lot of different ways. But at a certain point, that's when we have the OSS occur or attendance issues occur. And so I think that that's what we're finding, and now we're trying to get into that using different district supports and systems to help us support those students more fully. So, good question.
I will ask the question that I thought Suzette was going to ask. Is there any additional supports or resources that you think you need to help address some of your problem areas, like the attendance in IEPs?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest thing for us is just size. So our biggest thing is we're very large. We're not as large as we once were, but we're still very large, and we're very diverse. And so it's always about, managing that and just knowing that about us and what we experience every day. So it's actually higher than that. So yeah, 735 And we grow, so like basically what our counselors' data shows is for every student we lose, we gain about 3. So yeah. Yes, yes.
Well, I don't see any more questions. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you all.
And thank you for your work. All right, the next thing on our agenda is a teacher to staffing allocation presentation with Ms. MacArthur and I think Dr. Wilson.
Is this working? Can you hear me, or do I need to? Sorry, I have too much stuff here in front of me to get this microphone here close to me. So, okay, so we're just gonna kind of walk through how we do. At the beginning, it's not working. How about now? Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, thank you. I apologize. So we wanted to walk through a little bit about how we do staffing allocations and FTE allocations within our buildings. And this is mainly talking about core content teachers and elementary level teachers as well. So as we start the budget process each year, we meet with all of our building administrators, and I cannot say this enough. This is not done in a silo. It is done with multiple people and groups of us. I meet with Dr. Holes, Helen Porter as the chief of schools this year, Dr. Day and Dr. Taylor as part of the directors of elementary and secondary, Dave Wilson, and pulls data from his department to use. And so we all meet one-on-one with each one of our building administrators and walk through the data that we're seeing at each one of those schools. And the way this relates to our CSIP, though, we always try to have this at the top of our list, and in the top of our minds is CSIP goal is the primary. For 2.2, the percent of teachers retained each year will increase to 90%. It also relates to what we were just hearing for our building leaders with our student achievement goals. And so that CSIP goal number 3 is student achievement and increasing by 3% in our communications arts, in our ELA, and our math scores. And we heard that just from our building leaders. And so the way we start this is we track each one of our scholars individually. So the aid department pulls, we track each scholar's school for the next year based on their address. And so that is in our student information system. And so all that data is pulled for our current year students, and then they're increased a grade level and to matriculate up for the next year when we're doing projections for the following year budget. So their scholars are counted by grade level and by school. And then we project the enrollment is determined for each one of those grade levels and schools. And some scholars do have some special permissions that we have to go in and make sure that those people are in the right buildings and in the right grade levels. And the kind of the anomaly we always have to work as our kindergarten. And we heard that from Derby today, and we've heard, I know, from various other buildings as well. The kindergarten's kind of always, it is a projection. And so what we use for projecting our kindergarten numbers for the next year is based on the current year. And so it's much more difficult when that especially at some of our title schools where we don't have everyone going to kindergarten registration. And a lot of those people are signing up in July and August all the way up until when school starts. We don't have the solid number for our Ks. For the next year. And so like for a Derby, when she was talking about 3 sections, the previous year we had 53 kindergartners. So that's like 17 or 18 in a class. Well, the following year there was 69. And so when we were projecting, we had solid 3 sections. And if there's a 15 to 20 student difference in our kindergarten between one year and the next, it's very difficult to be able to say we're going to need an extra teacher, because we don't really know that until you get into the year. And it's not best practice to start adding teachers in the middle of the year and moving moving little kindergartners around and splitting them up after they have, in their current class sizes. So there's things like that we're never going to be able to predict exactly, but that we have to keep in the back of our mind, and we do our best, the best that we can with the numbers that we have available to us. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about elementary. So again, at elementary, grade level teachers are, first, second, third grade are allocated based on the student numbers. And there's formulas determined for the FTE at each school. The target class sizes for our K2 is 23 per class, and the target class size for our 3rd through 5th graders is 26 per class. The DESE standard class size for K2 is 25 and 3-5 is 27. And so the target that we have is underneath the standard Department of Elementary and Secondary Education class sizes for those levels. So then we go in and adjust the formulas for each building based on our at-risk population. So those title schools at elementary, and then the title eligible middle schools and high schools, to look at those different schools. And the denominator for those are what we're doing for next year. We've always kind of eyeballed it and made sure we try to make sure that those class sizes look smaller at our title, but there's for next year specifically, such as one of our budget priorities that was approved by the board in January, is to make sure that we're having additional supports at our title schools. We've lowered that denominator in our spreadsheet for our targeted and comprehensive schools. And so now what we're doing for K2 for our targeted and comprehensive schools is we're at a 21 for K2 and 25 for our 3-5. And so overall, when we look at those numbers district-wide, that is an addition of 8 additional FTE, or so 8 classroom teachers at the elementary level once we change those denominators in the spreadsheet. And again, we go through each one of our elementary building administrators, and we meet with them one-on-one. And so we look at each grade level. Again, some schools have 5 sections, some schools have 2 sections, and so then there's always some thought we have to put into it. It's a lot easier at a smaller school. It's more difficult. Like if you have 26 in a class, either you have 26 in a class or you have 13 in a class if you're between 1 and 2 sections. And so you have to make decisions on whether it's best to have 13 kids in a class at a smaller school, or you have 26 in a class and you add an aide or some additional support in some other way at those schools. Again, there's no guarantee because we look district-wide how many sections per building and per school, and there's an ebb and flow of enrollment at each school from year to year to year. And so we do try our best to make sure that, our teachers have placements, and that we try to make these decisions early so that if there are certain schools that are having a reduction of sections at the school, that we tell them we've already had all of our FTE meetings, and so that any teacher that may have to move will know that, to be able to use a transfer process through HR to be able to if they know they're going to have to move buildings. Again, we try, we don't want to have to move teachers, but when we can't automatically say that we're going to keep, if we're already adding 8 additional teachers, if we kept every teacher at every school, that would be, basically doubling that amount if we couldn't move teachers from one school to the other, to make sure that we're doing that based on where the enrollment is. This year, in all transparency, is going to be difficult. There's going to be late decisions because the attendance area work at Russell, those decisions are not going to be made until March and April. So there is going to be some movement of teachers once that decision is made between some of our schools, because we have to address the additional enrollment, and we don't know right now how many teachers and which students exactly those are going to be and where they're coming from. And so we're going to have to make sure that we consider that once those decisions are made. So at the elementary, or at the secondary level, we focus on our core level, our core content teachers. And so at the middle school level, there is teaming. And so there's basically every time we add 2 teachers, every time there's an enrollment increase, because you have to have a math, science, and a social studies ELA at EL. So it's either, typically there's 4 teachers at each level or for each team. And so it's either like a half team, adding a half team or a full team at each grade level if there's some ebb and flow of populations. So again, there's formulas that we determine the FTE for each school. We use a smaller denominator at our Lang and Oakland compared to what we use at Gentry and John Warner and Jeff to make sure that we're adjusting those formulas for the buildings based on those at-risk populations. Again, DESE standard class size for 5-6 is 30 and 7 through 12 is 33. And so our target class sizes for even the largest number is 28 or lower. And for our Lang and Oakland, we try to use 25 per class is the target number that we use for those schools. And then high school FTE is a little bit more difficult because of the way classes are. And so that's all based on numbers and overall enrollment as well. This year, again, is middle schools, you have the population and it's based on overall district-wide at those specific grades. And so our current 5th graders, which will be rising 6th grader, is a large class. Our current 8th graders that will matriculating out is a small class. And so to be able to make sure that we have our class sizes are reasonable, we're adding 8 FTE just at the middle school level for core content teachers to be able to address those class sizes. So that's just classroom teachers and nothing else. We're adding 16 FTE, 8 at elementary and 8 at middle school is what our projections are currently for the 24-25 school year, just to be able to maintain the class sizes at the levels that we want them to be. Again, high school allocations depend on overall course choices, and that process starts when the course guide and we start registration process, early in the year, and we do some simple tallies, and a lot of that is done at the department level as well as they start accumulating for high school. Again, K2, we've always prioritized our younger ages with smaller class sizes, and we're making a concerted effort this year at our Title I elementary and our Title I eligible middle and high schools with smaller class sizes. And then Battle High School is also prioritized at the high school level with smaller class sizes. And you'll be able to see on this next slide, we pulled some data to show graphically like what our ratios are at our different levels to show that we're really making an effort to make sure that our title schools have additional supports. And you can see at our elementary level, the first column over on the left-hand side shows with title funds, and so the second middle over, we excluded those funds to really make sure that we're comparing apples to apples. So our elementary ratios without title funds as 10.7 at non-title versus 9.61 to show that our class sizes and our teacher to student ratios are smaller at our title schools compared to our non-title schools. And you can see the same thing with the middle schools. We have a bar for each one of our middle schools there. And you can see that West, we did have an anomaly last year, just in full transparency. Oakland and Lang had about a 50 student fluctuation. We thought Lang was going to be higher and Oakland was going to be lower. There was a little bit, so that's why Oakland did push above Smithton. You can see this is our current year 23-24 data, but because of our projections, Oakland's numbers were projected to be lower and they came in a little bit higher, but you can still see significantly lower for those schools that we're trying to make sure that they have additional supports at those specific schools. And then the high school level, you can see Rockbridge, Hickman, and Battle High School, which our student or adult to student ratio there is much smaller than at our other 2 schools, to make sure that they have additional supports, knowing that our demographics are different at that school. So that is a broad overview of what we have, how the projections are made. Again, they are projections, so it's not ever going to be an exact science. We do the best that we can, and we listen to each one of our building leaders as they come and tell us what their needs are at those buildings. And I know Dr. Porter's here, Mr. Moore, Dr. Holes, Dr. Wilson's in our audience, and so I think we're all willing to take questions if you guys have additional questions about the process.
I'm going to guess there are questions. Go ahead, Paul.
Oh, good. Okay. So whenever I'm looking at the slides, it looks like whenever we're talking about standard class sizes, we're using the minimum standards from DESE rather than the recommended standards. I'm wondering, do we have any long-term plans to try to get closer to those recommended standards versus trying to meet just the bare minimum standards?
I don't think I'm on. Am I on? Okay. Sorry. I think when we're referencing some of those desirable standards, some of those standards are in equation to the smaller rural school districts that we have around us. So if you think about that, for instance, that is looking at a K-2 environment where the desirable standard is 17. 17 students in an academic environment across all of our school buildings would be a significant increase with regard to how we can accomplish that. So I think from a fiscal perspective, that would absolutely mean that we would have to go back out to our public and request additional funding. I don't want to misspeak with respect to that, Ms. MacArthur, but in order to do that, I'll give you a small example. We were looking at the potential of dropping some of our elementary buildings down to the 20 threshold. That was across all of our title elementary buildings. We additionally wanted to see what the impact would be if we went to 20 in the K-2 environments across all of them, and there was an additional, I want to say 80 educators that we needed to add to our structure. In order to do that, we would need a significant amount more of financial reserve. And so while the thought process has been discussed, the practicality at this point with regard to getting there has not necessarily been feasible for us. So I don't think that it is a never option. I think that it is one that we have to collectively continue to discuss and also go back to our taxpayers and our public to discuss as well.
I do want to point out as well, and we go through this every year when we start looking at compensation and our salary schedules, and when I do our compensation presentation in April, our ratios of our teachers to students and is much lower than all of our comparison districts, even in this area and statewide for our Kansas City. And so one of the reasons we have lower starting salaries compared to some of our comparison districts is because we have more people. And so we have really made an effort in previous boards and previous years to make sure that we are offering supports and that we do have relatively low class sizes. And so that is something that has been important to Columbia Public Schools, and that is one of the things that we have made an effort to, but again, like to drop it to like what he said, a 17, just to go from 23 to 21, just at our title schools, like I said, is an additional 8 FTE, and so that starts multiplying out, and so we need a significant number of additional FTE, and I'd love to say that we could find them, but we're in a teacher shortage, and so honestly, I don't even know that those people would exist, even if we made it, said that we wanted to do that.
And my other question is, how many classes have we had to get paraprofessionals because of the estimates when they've gone 5 to 10 people over the estimated class sizes?
I think we've had a handful maybe this fall. I mean, less than 5.
Yeah, less than 5. Aides.
Well, aides.
So you're talking their classroom aides or instructional aides as a support?
Right. Whenever you go over a certain ratio, you have to you have to provide additional supports in the room. I'm asking how many of classrooms did we end up underestimating and needing an additional aide in the room?
Yeah, so that process, we typically, what we do is we have a conversation not only with the building administrator, but also with that teacher. Some teachers have taken sort of the stance that having an additional adult instructional aide is not helpful or beneficial to them, and have elected not to. So while we could have offered more, some of our educators have elected not to take the instructional aides and rather take the 26 students that they have without the additional adult. Yeah. So this year, approximately 5.
And I'd like to add to that, as part of the recruitment, we're looking at developing what you call literacy training for all aides, to where they can come in during the summer months when they're not working, and perhaps we can employ them for retention as well as increasing. There's a conference I went to and brought the information back, and we're exploring that with HR. So as we hire them, we teach them about literacy. They get more proficient at reading. We hire them during the summer, and the hope is that they get into the teaching profession. So we are working on that as we speak.
I also want to. I also wanted to say at the elementary level, our overall sections for the current year is 403 sections, and we're increasing with that 8. It goes up to 411. So, like when you're thinking about less than 5 class sizes district-wide out of 400, over 400, the number, even though it seems significant to those individuals that are having to deal with those students in those large numbers, it's really a small percentage of the overall number of sections that we did right. And so I think we, have to keep that in the back of your mind as well.
Go ahead, Mr. Lyman.
So thank you for this presentation. This is something that has impacted my household directly a lot. And I know a lot of teachers that it's impacted over the last several years. So I have a lot. I could talk for probably the next half hour about different things, but I'll try to boil it down into one question. Right now, we've got classrooms in the district that are not in use. There are classrooms that you can walk through a building and you'll see a hallway that has 4 fourth grade classrooms, but one of them is not in use because at some point it was determined that there wasn't a need for there to be a classroom in use there, because rather than having classrooms of 17, it was, well, we'll have classrooms of 22. In my mind, I'm trying to determine in what world we wouldn't want a classroom of 17. If that opportunity presents itself, why would we intentionally put more kids in a classroom when we could have less? I think every teacher would take less kids. But my question is more, or is specifically about, if we were to, what would the financial impact be if we were to put a teacher in every single classroom that's available?
Significant, probably
In that if
$36
there's,
million. Yes.
So if that $3 to $6 million investment gave teachers smaller class sizes and allowed them to increase the effect that they have on their student achievement, why wouldn't that be money worth spending?
And so I'll let Devin and Dr. Yearwood answer this as well. But number one, I don't know that those people exist, even if we wanted to do that.
They do, though, because every year we have teachers that we move from one building to another. I had a phone conversation with one last night that was being told they're on the list where their school is losing 2 positions. And she's like, this will be the 3rd time that she's moved. And she's like, I'm not moving again. I won't come back. So that's going to be an empty classroom in that building because the building administrator's been told we don't need a classroom. We need to lose a person. And that person's like, well, then I'm done. I'm not going to teach anymore. I'll go to another discipline. So it's not that we're gaining it. It's losing people by doing this. We're not moving pawn pieces around. We're losing employees when we do this. And so that's my question is, what's the financial impact and where?
And
I think that what you're making a point that we would like to be able to invest in as many teachers as possible. I also think it's possibly not, we can't possibly quantify in this exact moment how many millions of dollars that would take, but that's not a decision that can be made right now to invest an additional $3 to $6 million in filling every classroom. That's a long-term conversation that would involve the public in approving an additional levy. And so I think if I can summarize what I believe your intent is to encourage the district to prioritize smaller class sizes in the long term. And I think we're aware that we want to do that. In the interest of time, I'm going to move on from this conversation and encourage people. If you have, there's a difference between questions and lots of discussion. We just do not have time for lots of discussion because we have things that are scheduled. If we need to have an additional session just to talk about this, we can. I'll give us 5 more minutes, and each of you can ask a question if you need.
I just want to say one thing real quick. And so there's always going to be this dichotomy between salaries and the number of people that we have. And I know that it's also very important that we make strides in our beginning teacher salaries to try and be able to recruit and retain teachers in our district, and to make stride within our comparison districts. And the reason why that we are 10 out of 12 with our comparison districts is that we already have more people. And so if we ever want to make movement with our salaries, we have to really balance that with the number of people that we have.
Real quick, I understand it's a game. It's just one of those things where I go.
And I do want to
struggle.
point out, we have already approved those additional 8 FTE at elementary and 8, that just those ads by themselves
Okay.
are $1 million.
April and then Blake.
And that's not 8 additional FTE. We're just moving.
No, that is 8 additional. We're going from 403 elementary classroom teachers to 411 classroom teachers. So that's an additional 8 from what we currently have right in the 23-24 school year.
Okay. One of my questions is on your slide, because I didn't understand the last slide where it shows students per FTE, like you were talking about. So like Lang Middle School, it says 8.49. Is that counting all the adult bodies in the building per student? Or is that counting the people who are delivering instruction per student?
Certified.
Certified, okay.
individuals, yes.
Are you good? Okay. I just wanted to add into the conversation, since it's just brief, and I won't go too long into what I was going to share. When you look at, we got a lot of emails yesterday saying that the research points to this. There's a lot of things that pull at the Tennessee, what happened in Tennessee in those models. But when you look at a larger swath of the data on research that's done on this, looking at a variety of rigor of the research, the effective size, and all of these things, when you think about when it looks at analyzing classroom size, it has a low impact factor, the effect sizes range, and to the point of it really looks at it being not fully, I'm blanking on the word because I'm trying to move fast here, but what they negligible, not as impactful as we perceive in our feelings. But then what has in that research, what they have found to be really effective is making sure that teachers have really strong PD, that they're effective at they have a strong efficacy in teaching the standards in the curriculum, as well as self-reflection of their efficacy of their individual teaching pedagogy in reaching students and analyzing their data to see is their pedagogy working well. And so making sure that we have high-performing teachers might be a better investment in the long run when looking at the large swath of data that looks and analyzes at class size.
Thank you. And that was brought up when we were discussing some things at the last work session too, is the efficacy rating of different interventions. Okay, if there are more questions, I would encourage board members to set up meetings with cabinet members. Just ask Dr. Yearwood who's the best person to talk to, and he will tell you. All right, we have one item of unfinished business. It's the discussion of our meeting schedule. I move that the topic of discussing our meeting schedule be considered informally. If there's no objection to that, we can go ahead and just have a discussion. All right, so you have before you a sheet that outlines the timeline for 2 different scenarios. And if you go down to the bottom of that section, we're either meeting Monday, like we do now, or Tuesday, which is the next day. So if you back up from there, you kind of see what would have to happen for the meeting to take place. And so the considerations that we're working within are just kind of a general parameter of the board members need 2 days to read through the agenda and ask questions, and then staff needs 2 days to provide the answers. So that we have to back it up at least 4 days. So we kind of had some discussion on this at the last work session. I've done a lot of speaking with individual board members and contacting board presidents of other districts that have their meetings on different days, and I'm open to thoughts from board members first on if there's a particular scenario that presents something of significance.
Sure. I'll say that although actually for my personal schedule, Monday is better. I actually think that the schedule for Tuesday meetings makes more sense in terms of the ability to both have the time needed to review things and get questions, and also for follow-up. I think one of the things that has come up is that when answers are received, sometimes feels very last minute. And I totally understand that also cabinet and the people responding have a lot of other things that they're trying to do and trying to get those answers. But then if there's not time for follow-up, or if it doesn't feel like the question was answered appropriately, we're just sort of out of time. And I think it has also led to some maybe longer conversations in the midst of board meetings where things could have been cleared up really simply with just like, had there been an opportunity to ask that quick follow-up of the cabinet member or of Dr. Yearwood from the response. So I guess I would just say I'm open to moving the meeting. I understand it would, for some things, be kind of a new rhythm of things and getting into it. It's still very early in the week, so I think in terms of some of the concerns that were addressed previously, in terms of like if a meeting were on Thursday, then suddenly like the entire week might be taken up with trying to answer and respond to questions and things like that. Tuesday is still very much towards the beginning of the week, but also maybe would provide the cabinet and our administration with time if there is like a pressing issue of even like a community issue that made its way into the schools over the weekend, right? Or things like that. And that has to be dealt with on Monday. It then provides a little more time to address some of those things as well. Not saying it has to be. Also, if it stays, and that's good too. Not trying to put more work on anyone.
If we did move from, and this is going to be for like Michelle and Brandy, et cetera, if we did move it from Monday to Tuesday, and I think we answered this before, how does that impact contracts getting signed? Because she's got to sign stuff if and when we approve it, hiring, et cetera. Like it's just a day, but I feel like it's a day that could impact.
I don't know. Yes, it is on. I'll just kind of repeat what I said last time. Ultimately, after the dust settles, the actual workload does not change. It doesn't change the workload. But I do remember, please, that every one of our schedules, meetings, every department meeting is driven off when you have your meeting. We're in a little bit of an even more dire situation now that we're waiting to remodel the flood damage, which has pushed more people into some of our smaller collaborative spaces for temporary officing. So if this is going to happen very quick, it will be fairly disruptive in the transition. Simply being able to accommodate your meeting, shift everybody's calendars. We all have standing meetings with our staff, our direct reports, our departments, and things like that. So just know, I mean, I don't think ultimately the workload changes, but there will be a transition period that everybody here will bear, and everybody that's involved in our schedules will also bear. There'll probably have to be some rescheduling on some events that are already scheduled for this room.
So we're not actually talking about, this would start in the school year 24-25, not like next month or anything. And I'm not, yeah.
I'm just.
Right.
The regularly.
Right, so like this room is scheduled out probably for a year, not like, so I'm sure we already have stuff for next school year, just FYI.
Well, I think from what I understand, we're waiting to schedule the rest of everything pending like when the board schedules things. But I can appreciate that there would need to be some shuffling. Are there any other comments about
I was
Dr.
just
Holtz?
gonna agree with Randy. It'll take some time to adjust. I think my department with one day wouldn't impact us as as much as if it were a Thursday or later in the week. However, I'm just concerned that we don't like to submit contracts that just require ratification. We want it to come to all of you so that you can approve it beforehand. And so I think having it at the beginning of the week is always going to be easier for us to make offers and get people in and move as quickly as possible. But again, one day is, we'll adjust if need be.
So the ratification issue, that's more of a when are things uploaded to the agenda? Is that
The
right?
ratification is when we can't wait for a board meeting. Because, for example, when we had the theater advertisements and we had to do it during winter break, but we didn't have a meeting before that so that you could all approve it, and we had to move very quickly so we could get our advertisements during that 3-week winter period during winter break so that everyone can see our advertisements
Okay.
for openings. And so
Because we didn't have a work session. then-
Correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
I can, yeah, I feel like if we were talking about eliminating a monthly meeting, that would be a humongous issue, but getting things onto the agenda is still going to have to happen at the same basic time. But if you you have to say if you feel like it would be a significant hardship, then that's a giant consideration. So please say.
Yeah, I would say that what would be best is for us to continue as we have, because we have our systems and we have our timelines. We would have to make an adjustment. But again, if you all, it's the will of the board. If that's what you decide, we'll have to adjust.
I really have a clarifying question of what I'm looking at here. So if I'm looking at this correctly, if the meeting stays on Monday, then we would have a hard stop on the unpublished agenda on Tuesday at some point in time, so that as a board member, we would have time to review that and know that things aren't showing up, and then we would have until Thursday, ideally earlier, to shoot over questions, and then we would be looking for a response sometime on Saturday on that. Okay.
Yes, that's right.
I just wanted to make sure I was reading that
That's right.
correctly.
So the agenda would still get published on Thursday to
Right.
the public, but it would, with the exception of like hourly and staff certified hires and like routine construction agreements,
Yeah.
we're not going to like not let people put those on the,
Right.
but no admin hires and no like giant contracts for, like a substitute provider or something like snuck
Yeah,
in
because
there.
I think what some of us struggle with is we will look at the unpublished agenda on Tuesday or Wednesday, and then it gets published on Thursday, and we're like, hold on, things are out of order. What got added? And then we're trying to figure out what was it that we didn't
Correct.
read. So that's good to.
Really,
I
the
like
main
that plan.
Yeah,
thing.
the main difference is in the timing for follow-up. So if we can, what I'm sensing is that we don't really want to change it, and that is fine. That's fine. I think if we can accomplish agreeing to these norms of timing, then if that satisfies all the requirements, that's fine. But I will keep an eye on the amount of follow-up we have to have and how timely those answers are given, because that has created a little bit of a scramble type feeling and has prompted like things being pulled from the consent agenda to consider separately and that kind of thing. So I think as we get into a team and, we're getting into a better groove, cabinet's getting into a better groove, we're grooving with each other, it'll smooth it, it'll flatten out. Dr. Yearwood, you look like you want to say something.
Yes, I have a quick statement, Madam President, if that's okay with you.
Of course.
Yes, okay. I appreciate the discussion on better facilitating agenda preparation prior to the board meetings for members of the board and CPS staff, preparing items for the board to consider at its meetings. There is often a flurry of activity leading up to the final posting of the meeting agenda. In any given agenda, there are hundreds of items that must be prepared, finalized to review before the board's agenda is publicly posted. I recognize that on occasion, there may be a last-minute or emergency items that may still come in, but adjusting the preparation timetable internally for the staff in our organization to have items ready in advance will help mitigate last-minute errors or missing components of items. It also provide board members who have access to items in advance of the public posting more time to review pending items. Working together from an established timeline for determining items in advance and then focusing on preparing those particular items for the final agenda slated for that month is a cooperative process and will continue to benefit our staff and the board moving forward. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Dr. Yearwood.
I was going to say something real quick. It might be more of a logistical thing, but like because if there's like a handful, like 3 to 5 items that get handled, we try to alphabetize, and so that's why, and so sticking stuff in the middle causes all of the things. So maybe like we have them add, like, I mean, it wouldn't be in alphabetical order, but if we add them at the end of the section so that if we're adding stuff late and so that it doesn't cause, I don't know, I'm just speaking off the cuff so that it's easier to identify if stuff, so you can get on there and review everything else that is, all the other 100 items that are on there and the 5 items that are not, you can tell which ones they are, and so you can have those reviewed.
Well, I think the expectation now is that things aren't going to be added after Tuesday. In order for us to give our questions to you by Thursday so that we can get the answers Saturday, which is, we cannot get the answers to our questions the same day of the meeting. It's too much of a scramble. So that's the feedback that I've gotten generally. So it seems like we are landing on keeping the meeting on Monday. Go ahead.
I don't care as much about the day of the meeting. I care more about that 2 to 3 days that we can actually read, because we're talking, I mean, you know from some of my comments that I try to read everything, and it's very hard to read everything within a 24-hour period of time, which is what I've had to do in the past.
Do you feel like having it set on Tuesday and having Thursday until Thursday giving that 2 nights?
Should be okay, because that effectively gives 2.5 days.
Okay.
So that should be, I'd like, full 3 days would be nice, but I'm not going to get greedy. Having a full 2 days is great.
Well, this is not set in policy. Let's give this a go and be flexible. If it turns out that this is not working for us, then we need to have another conversation for next year. All right. Blake, did you have something? Okay. All right. Well, it looks like we've kind of landed on Monday. No, we don't need to vote necessarily. There doesn't need to be a motion. I had Noel listed as an action item in case people felt strongly that we needed to vote. So sounds like we don't. All right, moving on to new business. What? Oh, April has something.
Does this start like for March or July? When does this plan start? Like,
Well,
we're going to keep Monday, but
we're not changing the day of the meeting.
no, but the workflow expectation, when does that start?
Well, Dr. Yearwood says March. I don't, like, people that need to get their contracts in, though, don't panic. Yes.
Because those dates have already been distributed out to all of our building leaders
Right.
about when deadlines and stuff are, so making a midnight
Possibly
change like that.
possibly July.
Yeah, I think if it's something to where, right, we give notice in March that this is a direction that we're going, and kind of set up a nature of saying, hey, if you can try your best beginning in April to meet that as a practice, I think that'd be great with a deadline, with like a hard start of the new fiscal year. That's when we begin this.
Yeah, if I may say, I agree with that. The sooner we get started, the better, because I think the impetus here is to get information to the board so you can make decisions for the district. So April, we need to give notice in March, get it moving in April, and we can adjust accordingly.
Thank you.
I was just going to quickly say, yeah, I'm going to send some correspondence out to my main submitters to let them know of this change. The
Perfect.
big memo comes out in June, so.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to new business. We're considering the substitute employment services bid award. Is there a motion for that?
I move to approve it.
Second.
Dr. Holtz and possibly April.
So the committee is recommending that we continue our partnership with EduStaff for our substitute employment services. We interviewed 4 companies of the 5 that submitted an RFP. I wanted to note a few changes we made to the contract based on feedback from our legal team. So on the bottom of page 5, the top of page 6, under section 5B, insurance, the statutory requirements have changed for insurance coverage throughout the term of the agreement since the original contract, and so they are now $1 million per occurrence and $3 million aggregate. The other change is on page 6. We inserted language into the proposed agreement that specifically states that the district is now waiving sovereign immunity. April was part of the committee, and she's going to briefly speak about her discussion and rationale that aided us in making our recommendation. Jim and Carissa from EduStaff are also here to answer any additional questions that you may have. April?
And I'm sorry, I should not have asked for a motion because this is just a first read. So we're not voting. So I remove my, we don't need
the motion.
Yeah, we don't need a motion. This is just a first read. We will do this at the March regular session. So this is just discussion. Sorry about that.
So it was a exciting process to sit in on the interviews. We interviewed 4 different companies, and I believe there were either 9 or 10 individuals from the district and from schools. We had representation from Lang Middle and Battle High School. And so, they have firsthand experience of what the day-to-day look as to get subs into the building. And so after we received all the presentations, then basically we kind of voted, and EduStaff came out on top. And as a side bonus, they also were the most financially efficient. Some of the things that were positive for that is, since they're the current provider, there's no implementation that's really needed, so we don't have a learning curve. We don't have that. Once again, we have something new over the summer to try and get everyone used to and what the new process is going to be. So that will be time savings and time that can be spent on other stuff. Some of the other pros were that EduStaff has been really willing to work hard with HR currently to develop some additional trainings for the sub pools, and they've been happy with the current deliverables because they came in. It was a rough start. Then we got hit with COVID. Then we have a labor shortage. But we've seen increased participation, better subfill rates each year. So there's been consistent improvements that have been happening. And so it was by far the view of the committee that we should maintain that relationship with EduStaff.
Are there any questions?
Not a specific question. I appreciate you hitting that on that history for EduStaff, right? Like they started in 2019 in that kind of space. I guess it's a question, but it's more of a preference. I appreciate in reading like there has been additional trainings that have been added. I think as we look at where our fiscal budget is and as we get the budget approved in June, I really seeing where we have the additional funds to do some required trainings for our substitutes that's paid, right, in that sense of being required, so that we are ensuring that it's not just this voluntary of like act. Wow, that was access to additional trainings, right? There are going to be people who will go to it. But I think saying that we're going to pay you and require you to come to some trainings just to make sure that we have continued quality control. I think EduStaff has done well. I tried to go become a sub in 2019 and then legal point out that, hey, you can't be paid by the district. So I did go through their training, their initial intake training, their first year, right? And I can only imagine it's gotten better. But it's just something of quality control throughout the years with folks I think would be good. And that's just something for us to look at. I would appreciate.
Yeah, well, go ahead. if you had
Just one of the ideas that we kind of got from other presentations is this. So we're going to use it, right? We're not going to reinvent the wheel, but we're going to use these great ideas. And EduStaff is amazing because anything that we bring, they're willing to implement and do, and vice versa. One of the things is having our new substitutes maybe shadow a veteran substitute and work through that so that their first experience isn't, they're in the classroom, they're with somebody, they feel supported, and so that's something that we're thinking of doing.
I think also particularly in what sometimes is perceived to be the hard to staff sub schools, because, people talk and they hear things. And so someone may say, well, I'm not going there. And this gives them the opportunity to shadow people in those buildings to go, oh, yeah, this would be a great place for me to sub.
Idea was to have listening sessions with our substitutes so that we can hear from them, maybe why they're not choosing to sub in a building so that we can make some changes.
Or dispel myths. It's like I've heard there's snakes at John Warner. No, there's not. Or whatever. Just kidding. I'm just picking on them. Yeah, it's because they have a zoo at Jeff. There's not actually snakes. I appreciate that. Like all the things you said about how we're not changing something over the summer. I think that's a super good idea. So were there any other comments about that? Okay, if you have any additional questions, board or staff, between now and March when we vote, please direct them to Dr. Holtz, or actually direct them to Dr. Yearwood, and then he'll pass them along to Dr. Holtz. Okay, thank you so much. This actually is an action item, the consideration of the construction agreement for the Smithton middle chiller replacement. Is there a motion to approve that?
So
Chiming in from the corner.
second.
Okay, this will be a roll call vote.
Mr. Willoughby? Yes. Ms. Farrow? Yes. Mr. Harper?
Yes.
Mr. Lyman?
Yes.
Ms. Snodgrass?
Yes.
Ms. Waters?
Yes. Okay. Thank you, everyone. We are just about on time. I am so proud of us. Good job. Is there a motion to adjourn to closed session?
Do we say this sentence? I move that we adjourn to executive session for the purposes of considering matters regarding negotiations with employee groups, personnel issues, and confidential or privileged communication between the district and its attorneys in accordance with section 610.021.13913 RSMO.
Second? This will be a roll call vote.
Okay. Ms. Farrow?
Yes.
Mr. Harper?
Yes.
Mr. Lyman?
Yep.
Ms. Snodgrass?
Yes.
Ms. Waters?
Yes. All right. Thank you. We need to start our executive session right now, so we will pivot to that.